Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for the November edition of the Elastic South Africa meetup. I appreciate you joining. I also appreciate if you're watching this as a recording, if you couldn't make it during the time slot. We're very interested to hear what is a good time frame or a good time to meet up. So we're very variable, but whatever works, please leave a note in the comments or in the chat of the session. Really appreciate it. So there's a specific topic for this week, which is really cloud. We want to talk about Elastic Cloud and some recent developments, particularly in South Africa, our sort of home geography here. So I'll go into cloud. I'll also focus on some of the features of cloud, do a recap, and then we'll move into a bit of a demo as well, and also a discussion about the pricing model, and then how you can leverage a cloud trial. For those who are on the live session, please, I would ask you at this point in time, we're going to run a quick little competition. The first person who types their email address into the chat will win some Elastic swag. So if you are live, you're on the call, please put your email address into the chat of this session, and you can win some swag. And if you're watching this as a recording, this is a good reason to join these events live, because we are going to start doing this more often. I'm going to apologize for the background noise. As per everyone, I'm working from home at the moment, and there's a lot of background noise that I just can't. I've tried for 18 months to try and reduce the background noise, and it's not going away. So, right, let's do an Elastic Cloud recap. So Elastic Cloud, or Elastic as a platform, we focus on delivering giving our customers the ability to deploy and manage where it makes sense. So to that point, we have different models for on-prem, for hybrid deployments, for cloud deployments, and for multi-cloud. And we facilitate that in a few ways. So the most basic way of implementing Elasticsearch is on-premise and as a self-managed standalone node. And you can do that even with the basic license. You can license self-managed nodes as well, but those self-managed nodes don't have any orchestration. So essentially, if you're running a cluster of 10 nodes, you are responsible for managing those 10 nodes, configuring the Elasticsearch.yaml, enabling security, configuring your integration of your cluster into your network and your domain. We then, on-prem, have the ability to provide a private cloud service. So for customers who want the ease of use of an orchestration-based deployment and management lifecycle, they want user interfaces rather than YAML files, and they want graphs and reporting dashboards instead of diving into operating systems and looking at resource usage. Then what we have is something called Elastic Cloud Enterprise. And really, this allows you to deploy, in a sense, a version of Elastic Cloud privately inside your data center. We also have, for on-premise environments as well, the Elastic Cloud on Kubernetes. If your company or your organization or your team is Kubernetes familiar or is currently running an operational environment using Kubernetes already, then slotting an Elasticsearch ECK operator into that environment and having an Elastic Cloud on Kubernetes experience is really probably the most suitable solution for you. What the ECK operator does is it basically provides you the same kind of kubectl type of interface where you manage your deployments using command line. You can use visual tools that you might run in the rest of your Kubernetes environment. But the idea is that we're not providing you an additional way of managing clusters and managing platforms. We're essentially baking it into the Kubernetes experience. You can take both those Elastic Cloud Enterprise and Elastic Cloud on Kubernetes and deploy them to IaaS providers. So if you want to spin up EC2 instances on AWS, you can spin those up, run Kubernetes and deploy the ECK operator on them, or you could deploy our ECE platform on those VMs as well. So in that sense, we're providing a way where you can essentially hybridize your environment. So you're making use of cloud services, you're making use of a cloud experience, but you're not offloading or you're not making use of the multi-tenancy aspects of a cloud provider or of our cloud platform, for example. Then the way to consume as a pure cloud service is our Elastic Cloud service. So I would categorize that as a PaaS platform or platform as a service. Sorry, we don't specifically call it SaaS or PaaS. It's really Elasticsearch as a service. But it most probably closely aligns with your definition of PaaS, because what we do is we take care of the infrastructure, the orchestration layer. We take care of things like snapshots and backups. We take care of the security posture in the cloud platform. Essentially, we provide all that underlying infrastructure management components, and then customers or users are responsible for the data. So by the data, I mean not only getting the data into the platform, but also making sure that your cluster sizes are large enough to handle your data volumes. You're responsible for sizing for performance as well as retention. But that gives our customers a lot of control without taking on the burden of having to look after operating system patching, worrying about hardware failures. That's all on us. So we follow a shared responsibility model, which you can find on our website, which aligns very closely to most major providers doing things like infrastructure as a service. We support multi-cloud, and when I say multi-cloud with Elastic Cloud, it's not only single vendor, multiple region, but we can also do multiple vendor, multiple region, multi-cloud support. So with Elastic Cloud, you can deploy your cloud clusters in whichever vendor and region makes the most sense for that workload. You can set up trust relationships between your different clusters across vendors and across regions, and you can replicate data across them. We take care of the SSL handshake between those two platforms. We worry about the security of the entire platform, and essentially we're delivering all of those capabilities as a service, and you never have to worry about your kind of underlying security. Obviously, things like user management, your role-based access control rules, for example, are up to you. But really, the kind of the core tenets of the security of the platform are Elastic's responsibility. So this is our global coverage. Like I mentioned, we're in all three big providers. So we have presence with AWS, Azure, and GCP. You can see that you can see kind of where our concentrations are. So predominantly Northern Hemisphere, but that's essentially where most of these platforms are at the moment in terms of even the big providers. And we have a fairly good spread. So depending on what your preference is for provider or what relationships you have, you can make use of those. You have the ability to subscribe with low friction, right? So there's a few options that are available. You can do a self-service subscription where you go onto our cloud platform and you can purchase at your license level, essentially choose which features and which service level you're looking for, and enter your credit card details and transact with us that way. You get billed essentially for the amount of RAM that you use. And the reason we roll everything up into RAM is because RAM has a direct correlation to storage. And then there are traffic charges above that, but really the RAM number defines what the majority of your costs are. There's pretty much, when you go through this process, there's no need to contact the salespeople or manage your subscription through a contract. You can instantly access a paid service with us. There are other ways to transact with us. So you can, for example, contract with us for credits, and that would require reaching out to myself and our territory executive who looks after Africa, and we can negotiate or size your workload, negotiate a bucket of credits and the rate at which you're getting those credits at, and what the unit costs of your contract happens to be. So when you start to commit to a certain spend level, obviously the pricing rate becomes preferential. And that gets even better when you do either multi-year, either you can do a single year commit or multi-year to 3-year commit. Yeah, there's. I think we have a good spread. We have a lot of users globally who are transacting with us in this way, where it's low friction. But we have a lot of large organizations that have a much higher spend, which have committed and are getting preferential rates because of that commitment. So just to touch on the benefits of the managed service. So as I've said, sort of at a high level, we have the ability to make deployments very easy. You can go global in minutes. You choose your region, you choose your provider, and you choose essentially the size and the scale of your cluster, and you can have that up and running in a few minutes. And I'll go through a quick demo as well. I'm just cognizant of time. We're going to try to keep this to half an hour today. But we can optimize for your use case. So we understand if it's a search use case or a logging and metrics use case, which components of the architecture do we need to think about? And we have best practices built in. So we're ultimately responsible for the availability and the uptime and the performance of these clusters. So we make sure that every cluster is deployed with the best practice, with our best practices actually encompassed in the template. So it's very difficult to kind of mismanage a cluster into a situation of failure unless you're just throwing so much data into it that it's not going to cater for that data. And we have a solution for that as well called autoscale. So you can set your clusters to basically just grow with the amount of data that you're ingesting, and then you can create lifecycle management policies that would move data from hot to lower tier of storage and then ultimately off the cluster as you require. It's also possible to upgrade with a few clicks. So this has been something that from experience and speaking to customers running self-managed platforms on premise, upgrading can be problematic or can be not a difficult exercise, but a time-consuming exercise, depending on how you want to look at it. With Elastic Cloud, essentially what we do is we upgrade in place and we upgrade without any kind of downtime to your environment. So we'll create new containers with the new version of Elasticsearch on, and we'll move your data across. Your applications logging to the cluster will not feel it. Your users using Kibana to view your data will not feel it. It will just effectively quite seamlessly move over to the new version when it's done upgrading. Being secure by default, this is a big one. I think there are a lot of, just by virtue of the nature of Elasticsearch being a downloadable open source or downloadable basic and open product, free and open product, essentially customers or users can experiment and they can run clusters and they don't need to switch on security. So there's a lot of little projects which are maybe not configured to the most secure standards. When deploying an Elastic Cloud, that level of security is switched on by default. So the operating systems that we deploy to are hardened. We take full control of the network security controls. Data is encrypted at rest, and we maintain continuous compliance. So by continuous compliance, we're constantly doing penetration tests, we're constantly scanning the infrastructure for vulnerabilities, and we're constantly aligning to our security standards and maintaining compliance with the certificates that we hold. We're also part of the Cloud Security Alliance as well, so we have a responsibility to maintain a security standard and a posture as part of that. And yeah, essentially, it's not possible to deploy an insecure cluster on Elastic Cloud unless you're going to, forcibly do it yourself by setting poor passwords and controls. But from an infrastructure point of view, that's all hardened up. We maintain the platform. We do automated backups. Like I said, we apply patches and updates to the operating systems and the orchestration platform running the containers. And we allow you to save time and as a consequence, save money. We also, when we're talking about saving money, you don't need, for example, if you want to move into a licensed cluster, normally you have to buy licenses, a minimum of 3 licenses, and those licenses are typically or cover you for 64 gigs of RAM per license. It's possible on Elastic Cloud to really right-size your workload. So you can spin up a cluster with 3 1 gig nodes, really. I mean, if you have a very low data ingestion volume and a short life cycle, you only need, let's say 2 gigs of RAM, which would equate to something like 64 gigs of storage. you can actually just spin up a very small cluster and not have to pay for that minimum of 3 licensed nodes. So it can be very cost effective. We do bundle everything up into one price. So from an infrastructure and a storage point of view, it all really goes up into the RAM number. So it's really easy to right size. And obviously, as a paying customer on our cloud platform, you're entitled to support. So our cloud platform engineers are monitoring the platform 24/7, and our support engineers are available 24/7. So in terms of future proofing, it's always easy. This is something else which is easy to discount or to not take full cognizance of, but it's really hard sometimes with a lot of software to stay up to date, and especially with Elastic, we're about to release 7.16. And the last time we had a community event, I was announcing 7.50, so that was 6 weeks ago. So we're constantly doing these we call them minor updates, but really they're major updates because there's so much functionality in them. We're constantly updating Elasticsearch, and so the ability to just one-click upgrade is really beneficial. So you can stay on the latest version, have the best innovations, and in fact, some of the innovations that we introduce are cloud orientated, and they tend to do things like reduce your monthly spend by being more efficient on how we transfer data between nodes, etc. So I mentioned compliance. So these are some of the compliance standards that we align to, and you can see the full list at elastic.co cloud security. If you want to get copies of these certificates, if we have an NDA in place with the organization, we can share those. And we also have a library of security control questions. So if there are specific things that your organization needs to ask questions about or find out processes for, you can contact me and we can we'll go through that library and get the approved official answers to those questions. So in terms of optimizing, cloud makes it really easy to optimize, and the reason for that is that you have the ability to make use of features that are quite difficult to implement in your own data center. Something like auto scaling. So if you know your workload is going to start at, let's say, 1 terabyte of storage, and you are going to over time grow to 10 terabytes of storage, but you don't want to worry about having to incrementally go in every few days or weeks or months and grow your cluster, or you want to make sure that your workload or your cluster is able to cater for spikes in your application traffic, for example, if you're doing an observability use case. So we have the ability to auto scale, expand the cloud infrastructure as you need it, and take on more ingest and more data. And we're working constantly on improving the way we auto scale. So currently, it's based on the amount of storage and the amount of data that you need to store based on your index lifecycle policy. So if your normal ingest rate is 500 gigs a day and it jumps to 1.5 terabytes a day, your hot nodes are going to fill up extremely quickly, and your nodes might fall over. So what we will do is we'll essentially maintain your lifecycle management policy. So we'll keep that data for the time that you've specified, but we'll grow the nodes to cater for that spike in ingest. And then you can come back later on and scale your nodes down if you don't want to keep operating at that particular level. And we're making additional changes. So we'll be able to auto scale based on things like CPU usage or memory requirements in future. I must stress that that's a roadmap item. I can't give any kind of indication or guarantee around when that'll be available, but the innovation continues in the back end. And by being a cloud customer, you are not you're in the best position to make use of those features when they become available. Also, things like data tiers and searchable snapshots. It's very easy to spin up new infrastructure or to spin up a new tier of data storage for data as it ages. So you don't have to write a PO or create a PO for new hardware or implement a new storage platform for searchable snapshots, for example. So you can just make use of our searchable snapshots tiering and data tiering very easily as you need it to retain data for longer. I've been over searchable snapshots a few times on the community calls, but basically the searchable snapshots feature is something we use to make long-term data retention much cheaper without taking data offline. So you're able to put data onto archive storage like S3 buckets or Azure Blob Storage, but still search it as if it's live. What you can also make use of is cross-cluster search and replication, where you can have multiple clusters spread around the world and search across all of those. Normally, to have that kind of footprint requires a huge amount of effort, contracts in different data center providers, infrastructure all over the show. We make it very, very easy to deploy. I unfortunately can't control the thunderstorm that's happening in the background, so I will speak up if I'm not legible or if I'm too soft. I apologize. It's a classic South African or Johannesburg afternoon thunderstorm after a very hot day. So speaking about South Africa, Elastic Cloud is now live in AWS Cape Town. It's been up for maybe just under a month. This is quite a big thing for us. We haven't had the ability to deploy Elastic Cloud in South Africa, so a lot of our customers have had to deploy into Europe or Dublin. This is a big deal for us. So if you have data sovereignty requirements that dictate your data must be local, or if you have latency concerns, this is the way to solve those challenges by choosing AWS as your provider and then Cape Town as your region. Let me go into a very quick demo, just in terms of our cloud platform, just so you can get a sense of how to deploy. And then I'll go into how you can make use of this, your 14-day trial. So the URL is cloud.elastic.co. You choose to create a deployment, and then you choose firstly, let's give it a name. And then you choose your provider, which would be AWS, and you choose your region, which is Cape Town. You can then choose, do you want storage optimized? Do you want a general purpose cluster or CPU optimized? So we give you a sort of a case here in terms of, or a description of when you want to choose these certain hardware profiles. So we provision hardware from the provider that really suits your use case. So this is, again, something that's way more flexible than doing this on premise. So let's say we just want a general purpose deployment, and then we can build in whatever version we prefer. I'll use 7.15, and then I'll show you how quickly it is to update, and then I'll do some advanced settings. So I want to auto scale this deployment, and what I want to do is I want to start, fairly small. So I would like to start at about 1 gig of RAM for the cluster, and I want to scale it up to 150 gigs of RAM. Sorry, this is getting quite crazy in the background. I think we're about to have some hail as well, so I'm just gonna push through. You can choose the amount of availability zones, so 1 zone or 2 zones, even up to 3 zones. 1 zone will give you a warning. We don't provide availability support on clusters with only 1 zone, so definitely 2 zones is the way to go. And then if you wanted to add a warm tier or a cold tier or a frozen tier, you could. The auto scaling will follow your ILM policy, so it might. So let's say you push data to warm, it will build a warm cluster or a warm tier for you. Okay, so then we can go into our Kibana settings. Kibana is very light. We only need a very small node, and if you're running an APM workload, you stand up an APM node. And if you want an enterprise search, if you would like to run an enterprise search, you can stand up an enterprise search node as well. So then you get a quick summary. You can see what your storage is, what your memory is, what the master node memory will be, and what your hourly rate is going to be. And then also in terms of your Kibana node, we give you the first gig of RAM free, and then you get a total cost. Also a summary of what your architecture is going to be. There is an equivalent API request for this, which you can also view. So if you wanted to define this as a template to use in future, you could. We also have a Terraform provider if you do make use of Terraform as an deployment automation template. We then give you the super user or anonymous user access credentials. So it's best to download those and keep them. And then the cluster should be up in a few minutes. In terms of existing clusters, so I've got a deployment here. If I wanted to change this or edit it, I could just click Edit Deployment. And at this stage, I could just grow my cluster. For example, this is not an auto scale deployment, so I haven't checked that box. So I can really just change it and upscale it to a higher storage and RAM number. I can add an additional tier of data. So you'll see you can add capacity here for warm nodes, for example. And again, I can push that change, and it will roll that change, but my cluster will always be available. The next thing I want to do here is actually upgrade it. So you'll see I'm on 7.14.2. I actually want to bring this up to 7.15.2. So it's really the upgrade process is as much as hitting upgrade, and it'll run an activity log. It'll give you an update on where your upgrade is in the process. And once the upgrade is finished running, you're basically up to date without any kind of effort. The next thing I wanted to do is just go through the pricing model. So the best way to go and work out what your costs are going to be is to take this URL in this presentation. I'll put it in the chat, and basically go through our pricing calculator. So in that sense, you can size up a cluster based on what your requirements are, and you can then see what the different costs would be based on your license level. So let's choose Enterprise. We'll choose AWS, and again, we can choose Cape Town, and choose your hardware profile. So again, I'll just use general purpose the way that I did when I built the cluster. And now I can see that I can start to play with my sizes and my configuration, and I get an hourly rate that comes up on the right-hand side here. A good way or a rule of thumb is to take that hourly rate and multiply it by 730, because there's 730 hours in a month, and then you can get a good sense of what your monthly cost is going to be. So this is a good way to experiment and to see. Otherwise, if you are looking to do a large deployment and you want to look at what the cost for credits would be on the credit model, you can contact me, and we can do an ingestion-based sizing exercise. What's really good is that you can also, if you have an existing subscription with AWS, GCP, or Azure, you can buy through their marketplaces. So a lot of companies have existing agreements with these providers where they commit to spend a certain amount of money per year. That commitment gets them benefits, credits, discounts, whatever the situation is. But oftentimes, cloud migrations tend to be a bit slow for these customers, and they end up sitting with unused credits. Elasticsearch or Elastic Cloud, the Elasticsearch Service, is a mechanism to buy or to draw down from that. So you can buy through the marketplace, and it will draw down from your existing spend commitment. So we really find that a lot of organizations see a huge amount of benefit to that, because they're transacting essentially with the cloud provider that they've got a contract with, not a third-party contract, so they can consume our services as if they're being delivered by the cloud provider, and it's on one invoice, which is really useful. We currently service customers of all types around the world, Instacart being a huge one, obviously. Unilever is massive, Shopify. I mean, these are lots of names that are instantly familiar. But many organizations around the world are using Elastic Cloud to run their cloud platforms, and really just getting a huge amount of value out of it, because we're reducing their time to deliver value and reducing the cost of their infrastructure, their total cost of ownership. So you can get started with Elastic today. If you go to elastic.co/cloud, there is a 14-day trial. Put your email address in, no credit card required, and you'll get 2 weeks worth of Elastic Cloud usage. There is a limit in terms of how big you can build your cluster. I think it's something like 4 gigs of RAM per node, but you can build a 3-node cluster, and you won't pay a cent for that. And once that trial period has expired, there's not going to be a bill that comes off of your credit card. That is just the end of the trial. If you want to engage with us, you absolutely can at the end of that. So really, I don't want to keep it for too long. Keep the meetup going for too long. I know everyone is super pressed for time. So that really brings us to the end of the session. And if you've hung around and watched the whole meetup, I really appreciate it. If you're watching live, I'm interested to see how many email addresses we got and who wins the swag. And if you're watching on the recorded version of this, then next time please join us live, because we would love your interaction and your involvement. So thanks very much. That's it from me. My email address is on the bottom of the screen on the slide. If I haven't met you, if we haven't had a conversation, please reach out to me, and I'd be happy to help.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks very much. We have one question in the chat.
Yeah.
You can put it. Can you see it? Just on the screen. So you can just see it on the screen.
Oh, this one?
Like no. I just put it on the screen. Like.
Oh, there we go. Cool. Multiple zones wreck the data? Not at all. We have multiple zones within one provider. So if you select 2 or 3 zones within AWS, those are zones in Cape Town. So that the availability zones are within a region. And that's in line with how the provider views the availability zones. If you deploy multiple clusters and you do cross-cluster replication, then that would be obviously then, yes, you're sending data off-site. But one of the great things is you can deploy clusters around the world, keep your data in those regions, but run cross-cluster search and like get answers to queries, but the data stays in the region. So no, multiple AZs doesn't wreck the data sovereignty advantage at all. And cross-cluster search, in fact, provides you a way to home data in each region where you need it to be, and then query it as if it's in one place.
Oh wow, the storm behind you is huge.
Yeah, it's intense, right? Yeah, it's intense.
Okay, I think those were all the questions.
Good.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much, Tim, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.